Gracias, muchas gracias por la invitación. Muy feliz de estar aquí. Voy a continuar esta conversación en inglés. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the 15 years of collaboration between the International Youth Foundation and the Inter-American Development Bank. Let me start by inviting Elena Heredero to the stage. Elena is the leading specialist at the MIF. She coordinates its strategy to build a competitive workforce for the future and leads the NEO initiative. Next, let me introduce you to Bill Reese, CEO of the International Youth Foundation since 2005. Bill has ample experience in the non-for-profit impact space and in Latin America. He also sits in the board of the Youth Business International and Solutions for Youth Employment. So let me start this session by recognizing the impact of this partnership. In the social impact space, we rarely see partnerships lasting more than 10 years, or even 15. Earlier today, we heard about the achievements of NEO in all 12 countries. Now, I'd like to focus more on how this impact came about, how both organizations push each other and challenge each other to create this impact. So I would like to start by asking you, Bill. So during lunch, we spoke about the different stages of this collaboration. So starting with the pilots to stages 1 to 3, Entra 21, to then being able to talk about an ecosystem. Could you tell us why this partnership has been so successful and how this partnership is different?
All right. Well, it is very different because this was the first grant that the 10-year-old MIF made for a multi-country regional youth employment program. And all those things were brand new. Multi-country, regional, youth employment with an IT piece to it. The name of the program was Entra 21. The logo was the enter button on your computer, which would be Entra in Portuguese, which I speak, and Spanish, which most of you speak. And these were the basic IT skills, not to make them coding experts or webmasters, but just to bring into a 21st century job or employment or livelihood opportunity some notion of these machines that are part of our lives today. And part of it was a life skills piece that would be built into the program so that young people, and the young people that we targeted were ninis. And I must tell you, the Latinos were calling them ninis when we designed this program in 2001. The Anglo world had not quite put the T on the end of it to call them neets. But Latin America was already realizing that if you're not in school and you're not in work and you're in that 15 to 24, whatever range, what the heck are you doing for your current life and your future? So Entra 21 was a set of life skills and basic IT skills targeted at ninis whose families were earning less than 2 minimum salaries. And 2 minimum salaries in most of Latin America for a family of 6 or 7 or 8 would be less than $1 a day per person. So these were people in real need. And that's what made this program different and new. But what made it different, and I'm looking at Nakamura-san over here, who was in our discussions 18 years ago when we concocted this program. What was new, too, is that we wanted to create a regional program. They're called pilots now, but believe me, they didn't seem like pilots to us then. These were large projects of 500, 600, 700 young people apiece. They were competitively chosen across the region, and the whole idea was to have an umbrella, if you will, or a big tent, under which there'd be 30 to 40, we ended up having 35 projects that were funded. And then it was to do a comparative analysis. Because so many donor agencies fund a project here, fund a project over there, fund something over here, and never can compare them. And what we wanted to do was compare what we hoped would be successful solutions for getting young people ready for 21st century jobs. But we didn't think that running 35 projects and individually analyzing them at the end of the game would be enough. We wanted to understand the learnings across the 35 projects that ended up being in 20 countries that first time. So it got us on the road of building a learning and a serious learning mentality, not for IYF or the MIF alone, but for the people in the field who are interested in running these programs, public and private sectors, and that you would build in, right from the very beginning, a learning and sharing agenda.
Thank you very much, Bill. Elena, Bill habla de la importancia de las alianzas multisectoriales del sector privado y el sector público y de cómo fue posible tener estos programas en diferentes países. Quería preguntarte, ¿cómo es que NEO ha logrado cambiar el ecosistema de empleabilidad juvenil?
Bueno, pues primero me encanta estar aquí con Bill, con IYF, celebrando estos, ¿cuántos? 18 años de trabajo conjunto. Es un honor. Para mí ha sido toda una escuela, realmente, trabajar desde Entra 21 hasta NEO. Y bueno, pues yo creo que NEO definitivamente y este enfoque de ecosistema ha sido... O sea, ya simplemente el hecho de que estamos hablando de ecosistema para mí es un salto cuántico, por así decirlo, ¿no? Hay una cita que me gusta bastante de un científico estadounidense que dice que los sistemas están diseñados para producir los resultados que éste logra, ¿no? Entonces, si miramos los sistemas de empleabilidad juvenil de la región, vemos que están produciendo desempleo, están produciendo brechas, y dicho así, es muy duro. Pero si las cosas funcionaran bien, pues realmente no estaríamos aquí todos reunidos hablando de cómo vamos a seguir aportando soluciones para estos retos. Y lo que trajo NEO es justamente esta visión, o sea, levantar un poco, remover las conciencias de todos los actores y decirles, si lo estuviéramos haciendo tan bien, tendríamos otro tipo de resultados, ¿no? Y las instituciones que sí tomaron el reto y que sí dijeron, es verdad, siempre hay algo que se puede mejorar, articulémonos, colaboremos. Ese fue como el salto realmente diferencial, ¿no? De decir, vamos a verlo todo desde una óptica más integral y desde lo que hace cada uno de los actores y como dicen también mucho cuando se analizan los sistemas, de ver el mundo con otros ojos, ponernos del lado de la empresa cuando somos una organización que está formando o ponernos del lado del gobierno cuando tenemos que afrontar pues, tantísimos retos en nuestra gestión diaria.
Gracias, Elena. Ciertamente muchos sistemas han sido diseñados de cierta manera y es por eso que tenemos esos resultados. Bill, Elena talks about how systems are designed in a certain way and to yield certain results. And so I remember we were talking about how these partnerships came about and for example, the partnerships with the private sector, some of them very, very successful to the point that now they have exported these models to other regions of the world. Perhaps you could share with us some of those examples. That would be interesting.
Good. 18 years ago, people were beginning to talk about the youth bulge and whether this might be an albatross or a political and social and truly economic dividend to have a large population of young people in their countries. But youth employment was not looked at yet as both a great opportunity or a great challenge. It was by a few, but I guarantee you it wasn't being talked about seriously at the World Bank, at most of the bilaterals, at most of the big foundations in America. We had a sense, though, at IYF, because we had already been working with global companies, that global business did understand the challenge of young people, because those young people, wherever they were working, in Brazil and Nigeria and India, wherever we were working, those young people, employed or unemployed, are their future employees, consumers. And if they are employed in large numbers, not necessarily by that large company, that the communities that they're working in would be healthy and safe and prosperous and moving forward in the future. But if there was a large population of young people that wasn't employed or employable or staying in school, it would be tough to do good business. And that could be in Pittsburgh, in Washington, D.C., in Lima, in whatever rural or poorer country of the world. So the part of the challenge of the MIF, and this was historic too, was to make a $10 million grant to these would-be 35 projects, but to ask that it be matched dollar for dollar by new money coming in from major global donors, mostly companies, but also bilateral agencies and some foundations. And companies bought into this. And I was so glad to see, I'm not sure if I'm seeing Hector now, but Microsoft was there. We were already working with Microsoft. They came in and worked in the first round of Entra 21 and have worked with us in Entra 21 Phase 2 and NEO the whole time. Now let me give you another example though. Caterpillar, which is one of the founders of NEO, the third phase, saw what we were doing here in Peru and said, we'd like to be part of that. Could we join one of those projects? Because we're sensing that, and this was the Peruvian part of Caterpillar, the dealer here, who said, we've got to do something as a company. And I don't think we were using corporate social responsibility or CSR 16 years ago like we are today. But they said, we need to invest in our own country. That project, let me tell you, had a slow beginning. We had to correct it in the beginning, but you learn as you go. Caterpillar, it turned out to be a very successful project. But most importantly, think about this, and this is why Entra and the MIF and all of you have had an impact in your region, but then around the world. Caterpillar today has invested more than $20 million in NEO and in Africa and the Middle East and Asia through programs that we're working with. Pepsi came into NEO after the Mexican alliance was put together. So it wasn't officially part of the Mexican alliance, but they learned from each other and talked to each other across different projects that we were all working on that had something to do with youth employability in Mexico. That was the first grant Pepsi ever had made anywhere in the world in youth employability. The project in Estado de Mexico was fabulously successful. Today, PepsiCo and its PepsiCo Foundation is investing globally with us, is putting our PTS online for the first time in a major way that all of you will be able to use about a year from now when it gets fully tested and translated and all that. And then is genderizing the modules so that we'll have special parts of PTS that are made for young women and older girls with somewhat at times different needs than young men. And so we'll have a genderized online. Now these are what you might call, in an iterative way, solutions for youth employment that you learn not overnight, but you adapt over time. You have made that possible. We talk about an ecosystem. This is an ecosystem for Latin America and the Caribbean of governmental, private business, multinational business, local businesses, and strong civil society organizations. And you, whether you know it or not, and most of you don't know it, but I want you to feel a little bit of pride about this. You have influenced the way African, Middle Eastern, and Asian foundations, bilaterals, and the World Bank are looking at youth employment, because this is the longest and biggest continuous multilateral effort in youth employment of any major multilateral development bank of all the different banks in the world. And yet it has brought in to it and not tried to hog all the glory, because it's always been a participatory platform, multiple countries or companies, and then different bilaterals that you saw here. The Germans, the Brits, and others have contributed to these projects. And that is a real success story. And then they've taken it, as I say, from Latin America, taken some of these lessons learned to other parts of the world. And that's something that everyone here in the bank, in the Inter-American Bank, can be really proud of.
Thank you, Bill. It's certainly important to think in terms of systems and consider all stakeholders. And definitely something we should be proud of, a model that has been exported to other regions of the world. Elena, I want to ask you about how can we continue to to be creating impact? ¿Cómo podemos continuar creando este impacto en el futuro?
Bueno, pues yo creo que continuando la labor que iniciamos, ¿no? Algunos iniciaron hace muchísimos años y otros pues hace tal vez 4, ¿no? Con Neo. Y ahí yo creo que el impulso que yo estoy viendo en esta conferencia y con las experiencias que están mostrando los países es impresionante. O sea, normalmente la sostenibilidad no está garantizada en ningún proyecto que nosotros financiamos, ¿verdad? Y ver aquí cómo las instituciones, los socios de las alianzas están verdaderamente comprometidos en seguir adelante con o sin el apoyo de IYF o del banco o del FOMIN. Eso para mí ya es una señal de que esta semilla ha arraigado y que va a seguir adelante sin ninguna duda. Entonces, para mí, yo creo que eso lo estamos constatando esta tarde aquí, ¿no? Y bueno, desde el punto de vista tal vez del banco o de las nuevas prioridades que estamos analizando y que dentro de un año se va a lanzar la nueva estrategia del BID para el 2020-2023, un tema clave va a ser el tema del futuro del trabajo. Y como pues has expuesto David y los miembros del panel, cómo las nuevas tecnologías van a estar transformando el mundo del trabajo, las habilidades, el sector educativo y de formación. Entonces, ahí yo creo que hay una oportunidad, ¿no? muy grande y tal vez es traer un poquito más o seguir trayendo tecnologías hacia la formación o hacia los sistemas de gestión de una manera tal vez mucho más intencionada, ¿no? Y bueno, yo creo que por ahí puede haber una ventana de trabajo conjunto a futuro.
Gracias, Elena. And one final question, Bill. Along the same lines, talking about the future, today we heard about NEO 2.0. What are the next steps? What are the next steps for these partnerships? What are the next steps for the International Youth Foundation?
Well, not just for the International Youth Foundation, but I say all of us here. The work isn't done. Youth employment or underemployment or unemployment is not a disease. You can come up with a vaccine and get rid of it. Even rich countries in the world have to be worried about what will the workforce look like in 2030 or 2040 or 2050. So this isn't just a question of poverty and development or underdevelopment. This is every country in the world. And I think every parent in the world could understand if you're bringing kids into the world today and they're going to school and they're going to work, and we hear about how many jobs are going to be lost by automation, and that's real, although I'm not sure how anyone arrives at all those numbers. Some of this is crystal ball thinking that is true, jobs are going to disappear, but to come up with some of these numbers I think could scare the hell out of people and say, I'll tackle a different problem rather than youth employment. And I think we have to be practical and embrace this problem, again, in every country in the world. But there's a lot learned here. We have learned a tremendous amount. A challenge, I think, for all of us is to share it better. Thank you for the 10 cameo performances here. We've got to make sure that all of us know what resources are there. Most of it is in Spanish. So you could take in El Salvador some materials from the Dominican Republic or Chile or Peru and use them and share your stuff. And we've got to do that much more proactively because we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. We have learned a heck of a lot around local labor market studies from the very first phase of Entra 21 about the importance of life skills, placement services, not waiting until the students are about to graduate to look for a job. We've learned a lot about monitoring and evaluation and how to take that seriously to really know what we've achieved, not just to report back to a donor, but to make the case with our government agencies and to the donors themselves that the money is being well spent And there can be something called systems change if we set our minds to it. But systems change takes more than monitoring and evaluation and continuous funding. It also takes political will by governments to stick with something that's working and not throw the baby out with the bathwater when a new government comes in and wants to start history all over again. And that happens in all of our countries. So there's a lot to be learned here. The work isn't done. If we're going to get to the 2030 goals, talk about eradicating extreme poverty by 2030. And to me, eradicating extreme poverty means everyone has a job. May not be making upper middle class salaries. Maybe it's someone still struggling at a lower working class salary level, or maybe has not a job in the formal economy, but is getting by, and more than just getting by having maybe 2 or 3 livelihoods that they're pursuing in different entrepreneurial ways. We'll only eradicate extreme poverty by every young teenager today in 15 years at 2030 being, and they'll be in their 30s. If they are in their 30s and are unemployed, and you heard our McDonald's or Arcos folks talking today about the first job and how important that first job is. But statistics, you don't need an RCT here to understand that if you don't have a job by the time you're 25, you may never get a job or have a sustainable livelihood. We will not eradicate extreme poverty and reach the 2030 goals if today's teenagers aren't much better employed when they're 30 than they are today. And that's going to take economic growth, not just good training. It's going to take investment strategies. It's going to take governments doing the right things. It's going to take philanthropies doing, frankly, more in this area. A lot of the big famous foundations of this world, and we make the case with them frequently, they need to put as much money into this as they put into HIV or malaria. This is a huge challenge because without young people decently employed in their 30s, they won't be in their 40s. And we won't have then political stability to do those other things that we need to make our countries safe and successful. And that would mean tackling global warming. Can you imagine tackling global warming to make long-term investments that will only pay off in 10 or 20 years if you don't have full employment and people in a public that's satisfied with their government and willing to support a government that makes long-term investments in climate? And they won't have the money to do it, the governments, if people are unemployed. So youth employment, to me, is as big a challenge as global warming. And we've got to take it seriously. And I think there's enough knowledge in this room to really make sure we have a 2.0 and a 3.0.
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you very much, Elena. Certainly there's a wealth of knowledge that needs to be shared, and it's up to us to take initiative, share this knowledge, and keep learning, especially in the context of the SDGs and the eradication of poverty. It has been very interesting to hear your perspectives on these partnerships, and it is definitely something we want to there are definitely many lessons that we can use in future initiatives targeting youth. Thank you very much for inviting me and for having me here. I'll now give the floor to Sheila.
Andrea,
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. Let me thank you and put in a plug for a program that IYF runs, and it's called Youth Action Net. And it's a program that awards fellowships to people under 30 who've started a social enterprise. And Andrea is a Peruvian who started a small enterprise support program in Cusco and is now off in England getting an MBA, and I'm sure she's going to come back and grow that social enterprise of hers. And we need to understand that youth employment and entrepreneurship are not just going to be solved by governments and big companies, although we need them mightily. They will also be solved partially by young people getting into the game of doing development, and that's what Youth Action Net and fellows like Andrea do. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill.